All right, welcome to a special year-end episode of The Life Stylist, where I take a moment to reflect on some of the most fascinating conversations and incredible guests I've had the privilege of hosting in 2024. Now, over the show's 8-year history, we've ventured into topics and explored ideas that push boundaries and challenge conventional thinking, often sparking controversy, but always encouraging deep reflection. And this year was certainly no exception. We had guests like Flat Earth Dave, who shared his perspective on one of the most hotly debated topics of our time, and of course Alex Jones, whose insights on politics, the media, and global power structures are often polarizing, but just as often, and unfortunately I must say, accurate. Doctors Andrew Kaufman and Peter McCullough also joined us to discuss the deeper layers of medicine and public health, with Dr. McCullough's episode even getting banned from YouTube, womp womp, proving how some topics are too hot to handle for the mainstream platforms. And by the way, we're getting a lot of censorship to this day on Instagram and YouTube. So if you want to get all of the uncensored content, I recommend you join our Telegram group, which you can find at lukestory.com/telegram. And then on the metaphysical side, which happens to be my favorite personally as the host, I also had the privilege of connecting with spiritual teachers who inspire millions like Teal Swan and Marianne Williamson. And these conversations were full of wisdom on personal growth, spirituality, and the human experience in general. And shows like that provided a much-needed balance to the hard-hitting facts of modern life we often discuss on this podcast. In the health and wellness space, we had leaders like Dr. Josh Axe and Dr. Edward Group and David Reid from Mana. And these experts shared cutting-edge knowledge about how we can all live healthier lives, whether through mindset, detox, or nutrition, and really helping us to unlock our potential and find new ways to nourish both our bodies and our minds. And we also had some really fun and unique moments on the show, like the first ever live musical performance from Mike Posner and an incredible conversation with relationship expert Matthew Hussey. And if you missed that one, you definitely want to hear the excerpts in this episode. His practical advice on love, communication, and connection is a must-watch or listen for anyone who's looking for a partner in this crazy world of ours. So from the controversial to calming, from the spiritual to the scientific, we had a diverse range of guests this year, each of whom left their mark in different ways. And whether they challenged us to think differently, provided new healing strategies, or simply entertained us, every episode has been an opportunity to grow, learn, and dive deeper into the mysteries of life, which is what I and this show are all about. As for me, well, it's been an incredible ride. As usual, I'm just so grateful to have had the chance to share this podcast with you. So sit back, relax, and get ready for an episode filled with some of the best moments from the past year on The Life Stylist. And our last show of 2024 will be a real banger, folks. It comes out next Tuesday, featuring the legendary Paul Chek. So you definitely want to hit that subscribe or follow button so you don't miss that episode. And before we kick it off, I've got a couple exciting developments you might have missed this past year. First off, all new Life Stylist episodes on Spotify now feature video, so you can watch or listen directly on the app, which is super cool. But the biggest update for me this year has been launching a brand new website at lukestory.com. We now have a searchable podcast archive of over 600 episodes where you can search by keyword, topic, or guest name. And each episode has its own blog post where you can stream the audio, watch the video, and even download an MP3 for offline listening. And you'll also find clickable show notes and complete written transcripts for you readers out there. And if you can't or won't, for whatever reason, get yourself over to lukestory.com for all the podcast goodies, you definitely want to join my spam-free weekly newsletter. To do so, just go to lukestory.com/newsletter and I will email you a new podcast episode every Tuesday morning with all the data I just described right in the body of the email. Again, that's lukestory.com/newsletter. By the way, the newsletter is also a great way to get around censorship because as of now, the powers that be can't control the emails I send you. And I'll also let you know that the new site also features major upgrades to the Master Market, which is a highly curated shopping hub I created for all things wellness based on the products I personally use and recommend. So if you find something listed on my site store, that means I've vetted it and vouched for it. Plus, almost every product we feature in the store comes with exclusive discounts. And the Master Market is neatly categorized and fully searchable. So if you're wondering What would Luke recommend for red light or saunas or cold plunges or vitamin supplements, etc.? Just hit that search bar and you will find what you're looking for. You can think of the master market as sort of a micro Amazon for the most cutting edge biohacking and wellness products. But unlike Amazon, I've already done the work to find the best in class for each product, so you don't have to waste your time doing it. It happens to be that I'm kind of a geek and I like researching these kind of things, which is why I work so hard at doing it and then list those items on my site store. And another epic project this year has been the launch of my very own merch line, which I have wanted to do forever. So I went ahead and created dozens of t-shirt, hat, and hoodie designs for men, women, and even kids based on the ethos of this show. So if you dig this podcast, you will love the merch over at lukestoreymerch.com. Okay, lastly, before we jump into this best of episode, I want to personally thank each and every one of you who've supported this show by listening, sharing it with friends, posting clips on social media, and of course, every one of you who's gone the extra mile and left a rating and review. You have no idea how much that helps people like us in the podcast game, especially because everyone and their cousin has a podcast now. So those ratings and reviews, I know I get sick of hearing podcast hosts ask for them too, but they really do help. So if you're a regular listener and you haven't done that yet, I would greatly appreciate it. If you don't feel like doing that, just keep listening. That works too. In closing, I'll just say I have so much love and gratitude for all of you who've provided an audience for our incredible guest, and more importantly, applied the wisdom they've shared into your lives. The world is a better place because of it. So thank all you guys for the 14 million downloads. Let's keep it going. And I wish you and yours a magnificent year in 2025, and I'll see you on the other side.
You just said the secret of the universe. We have free will. We're conscious beings that can literally interface with infinity. And from my perspective, in my view, and I know it's true, you just said the secret of the universe. That wasn't a throwaway line. I didn't just say that because you're a nice guy. I don't want you to feel good. What you just said, and understanding that, is the study of 1,000 lifetimes. You just said everything right there. And then once you know that, you know everything. What you just said is the answer to everything. From my understanding of it, I don't read this in books. I've had these experiences, and I'm not against ayahuasca or any of that. I'm actually scared of it because I already have those experiences every time I go to sleep. I dream from the time I go to sleep to the time I wake up. And I've had a lot of dreams come true. I see all the same stuff people describe with ayahuasca in my dreams. And so I'm like, well, whatever's going on in my head, I had head injuries and stuff when I was younger. It kind of shifts me a little bit. I think that, kind of cut the conch of the head, the thing happens. But I almost don't want to tune the channel I'm on because I'm on the right channel. I'm glad people are over there finding the channel. They should take it really serious because it's dangerous. But anything powerful is dangerous. So what you said that's it. Infinite consciousness, infinite reality, infinite will. But there is, from my understanding, an overdriving force that actually built this. And so whereas we see this as infinite, it is infinite, but there is infinite systems upon infinite, and there's other consciousnesses with infinite things going on. And then we're kind of in this bubble of this infinite thing. And so we are beings, whether we just arrived or been here before, that are birthed with consciousness, or you could say always existed. But the point is that we have infinite consciousness and infinite ability to absorb consciousness. And so when you look at somebody like Bill Gates or Klaus Schwab, you can physically see it. You can watch their mannerisms. You can see how infantile they are, how sophomoric they are. And then you see their writings and what they do and the horrible things they do and how unhappy they are, how unhappy their families are. The archetypal example will be Luciferian energy, where they want to create their own universe, their own thing, breakaway quote from God, the infinite. And the thing we see is when they do that, they say, well, it's not allowed to just control things, and there's something bigger than this. I'm going to do what I want. Well, then how come every time it's enslave people and control people? And because people want to go with the source that's already the real thing. That's us. We're already part of it. And so they are a form of cancer that's always trying to break away. We've already been given infinite free will. But there is going to be like water going downhill and over a waterfall, the ocean, a path to that. And if you want to swim upstream and fight that all day long, that is who these people are. And we're meant to go off the planet and go interdimensional and just at our third dimensional level, do unlimited stuff. We're going to green galaxies upon galaxies. And by the time it's so obvious. We all ingrained know this because the universe is like a figure eight or a loop. We're already into the future. We're into the past. We're now. It's all here. We already know what we're going to do in the future. We already know we did in the past because there is no past and future. We are divine creatures. And these people cannot understand that. And they think, I've got to learn how to clone my body. I've got to learn how to live forever. I've got to prop up Xi Jinping because they'll let us have human-animal clone farms and they'll give us a life extension. And yeah, maybe they'll have some blob of flesh that lives 5,000 years. That's not going to be the original them. It's a fraud. There is no way to clone or copy the spirit. There's no way to have 100 bodies and claim that you transmitted memories into it. Maybe the AI will fool the voice print. Maybe it'll fool your family, but it's not you, because we really are, it's like footprints in the sand. Our third dimensional manifestation is the lowest level of the manifestation of what we are. And all the ancients knew that. Every culture knew that. The enemy knows that. And that's why I know that it is a force that is against humans, that is trying to program us so that we don't take the next steps. Because in an infinite universe, there have been a lot of creatures and a lot of entities that have decided to go against us, and they've built a lot of horrible stuff. And they're trying to seduce us and conscript us to join them. And I'll use the cheesy analogies. I hadn't seen it since I was a little kid, and I came back across it online and watched some of it, then I read the synopsis. But it's like Poltergeist. You've got this religious satanic leader who poses as a Christian. He tricks a bunch of people to go out in the Nevada desert into a cave to basically die with him because he wants to keep their souls around him. He's figured out a way not to go to hell, get all these good people around him and somehow bind their spirits to him so that he can have his own little heaven. And then the whole thing is about they actually want out and them getting out and getting away. And that's really, they know this. The establishment knows this. So why would you then want to recreate the plot from Poltergeist in the real world?
Well, they know it because historically they're obsessed with occultism, their own sort of warped perspective of spirituality. It's not that these people aren't spiritual. It's just that they have it seems to be a parasitic approach to life.
They just say, I want total power. And if you bend the rules, you can distort things and in this dimension get more power.
If you are, and I know this from my own experience, the more aligned I am with God, the more that I am surrendering to God's will. The paradox of that is that the more personal power I have and the less weak I feel, and therefore I don't need to form a counterfeit power within myself by controlling or dominating or harming other people.
But that takes coming of age. And that's why they're targeting the youth with chemicals and toxic culture, because the people coming of age is going to accelerate. You can feel the consciousness. Everybody knows it. And that's why they're trying to carpet bomb the children before this ascension happens. I know from covering Skull and Bones and talking to people that were members off record and on record, and I know from infiltrating Bohemian Grove, and I know from studying the occult, and I know from reading their writings that they are dialing in to a Luciferian, or what you could call destructive, dark, satanic spirit or energetic transmission that inspires them. And so it's not human. These people are being programmed. They've turned their will over to it. And I've been at Bohemian Grove, and I thought it was a joke. I don't know. That's a whole story.
No, that documentary was one of the first sort of counterculture, subversive, truther films that I ever saw. Were you scared shitless going in there?
Well, that's a long story. I had actually been around occultists, and it was because beautiful women were and were wanting to have sex with me, and so I was like, I was promiscuous. Sure, I'll do it. And then boom, it's the occult again. Wow, I'm so lucky. And because the vibe was so bad, but because let me tell you something. It's one thing to be around gorgeous young women. It's another thing when you're in a deal and it's like old rich men, and they look like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. All right, and I don't know if you've ever been around real Satanists.
I don't, not to my knowledge.
It's not
I've been to some dark places, but
it's not good.
Not like that.
It's not good. And you're like, whoa, because it's a thing you're passing. And the thing is, I was able to resonate with that energy. And I was able to sit there and basically allow myself to be influenced, never fully possessed. But that's what, and that was the thing, was come into the circle, come into the energy, come into this thing. And that's really what it is. And so they're getting a not of this world, not of this dimension energy. And it's real. And so they have literally dialed in and turned themselves over to the dark side. And then the first thing it tells you is, I want you to commit crimes against the universe, against God. I want you to do horrible things, because I'll give you the secrets, but you've got to kill that other transmission. You've got to decide to fully tune over here. And once you do these bad things, it blows the transistors in your spirit or your brain, whatever it is, where you can't dial back. So it's wanting you to blow up these circuits.
Yeah, because within those circuits exists your empathy.
Yes.
And I think this is the challenge.
So they're doing evil things to get closer to the source.
Yeah. This is the challenge I think people have that are inherently good people, and the cognitive dissonance that prevents them from acknowledging what we're facing right now and have been for a very long time.
We're facing people that want to be as evil as they can be.
Right. Because if you're not evil, you can't put yourself in the mind or consciousness of someone who is evil, because you have access to love and empathy and compassion, and you're connected to God in your own unique way. It's like, if you're a loving, kind person, try to put yourself in the mind of a Jeffrey Dahmer and imagine what motivates him and how he's deriving pleasure from the harm that he's causing, right? It's like you just can't fathom that. But if you have a politician, let's say, or a quote unquote world leader who puts on a suit and, is a great actor, like an Obama, for example, just made by Hollywood, kind of likable personality, funny, charismatic, you can't see behind the mask because you don't have a mask, because you're a real human being with a real heart and real love, right? And
I agree, yeah.
This is part of the denial system, I think, that keeps the public dumbed down. Because,
and you project your own goodness onto them.
Yeah, you can't imagine that someone is that evil. And especially you can't imagine that someone is that evil has been placed in a position of influence and power. And I think that's a big blind spot we have.
Absolutely.
As kind, caring people. We literally can't imagine it because we don't have those kind of thoughts.
I agree. And once they do this evil stuff, that's what it is. It's just going against the grain. And people say, there is no good and evil beyond good and evil. No, there's a little kid playing in their front yard, picking daisies, and you walk over with a ball peen hammer and beat their brains out. That's not nice. I mean, you're not even like a cat that's hungry that grabs a kid and eats them. Because to them, that's hunting. It wants to eat. No, you're doing it just to be mean and destroy some innocent person's future. And to them, that's power to them. Like, I just ruined somebody's destiny. I just stole their future. I did it for me. It's all about this selfishness.
Because they're psychopaths. And if you're not a psychopath, you can't understand the mind of a psychopath. Did you know that at least 1 in 4 couples are struggling with fertility? And many of us have issues with low mood and sex drive, difficulty losing body fat, and poor cardiovascular health. Can you guess the common denominator in all this? That's right, I'm talking about testosterone, folks. And let me tell you, low T is something that affects women as well as men, so everyone listen up. Most women after 25 or 30 have low testosterone, and it turns out healthy women should have at least 10 times more testosterone than estrogen. I had to look that up to believe it, but it's actually true. Upgraded T is a collection of herbs that have all been clinically studied and shown to produce award-winning results. Users have seen a boost in testosterone up to 30% in just 90 days. It's got 5 ingredients that raise testosterone while lowering both inflammation and stress and boosting mood by regulating cortisol. Upgraded T enhances blood flow, promotes lean muscle mass and immune function, supports heart health, and boosts collagen for healthy hair, skin, nails, and bones. And of course, it also supports sexual health and erectile function, which is a win for both men and women. So to get on board with this testosterone boost, go to upgradedformulas.com and use the code Luke15 for 15% off. Oh, and keep in mind that most supplements on the market are very poorly absorbed. The key difference with upgraded formulas is that their nano-stabilized supplements bypass digestion and go straight into the blood where they can get to work doing what they need to do. So stop wasting your money on expensive pee, folks. Go to upgradedformulas.com and use the code Luke15.
What you're talking about right now is really right. in my opinion, because what you're really saying is you changed your past. You didn't change the events that happened, but as you evolved and your consciousness evolved, you look back at those events through a new lens, and the way in which you saw them changed. And the role in which those events play in your present moment, in your story now, is different. And so literally you're talking about changing your past, which most people, you say on the surface, like, you can't change, the past is done, you can't change the past.
Yeah.
But you can.
Yeah.
So it's very beautiful and poignant. And we can do that. The past doesn't change itself, right? So just because your consciousness evolves, you come to a new understanding, you have a new vantage point in life. All of us do as we evolve and we mature. The way you see the events in your past don't change. They're still, the role they play in your story, in your present moment, is still defined by the consciousness you had when they happened. And so you have to go back and look and rewrite that story. And maybe it has the same events, but the meaning is different. I believe you could literally do that with your whole life. That would be too much work. So what events are worth going and changing the interpretation of, the meaning of, changing the lens, looking at the old event with the new vantage point? Well, the ones you should look at and reinterpret are the ones that hurt. Why do they hurt? I think because they're calling to be changed. I think life is rigged that way on purpose, right? They're drawing our attention to them. And the potential there is just really exciting for what we can do. And to literally view the worst thing that ever happened to you as the best thing that ever happened to you. You know? The snake bite sucked when it happened. Now I wouldn't trade it for anything. Anything. What a gift. What drives a person to want to walk from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean? You know, I was somebody who had been very successful. Yeah, I had been nominated for Grammys. I made a lot of money. And something was just missing. I remember I was renting this little guest house in West Hollywood, like a house behind someone else's house, and looking into this mirror with the toothpaste spots on the mirror and just seeing what I thought was the truth at the time. Like this aging pop star who is haunted by the ghost of his 20s and who was now 30. And getting a call that one of my best friends growing up was dead. And just looking in that polka dot mirror thinking, dude, this can't be it. Like, I thought there would be more than this. I thought my life would feel different. And I've accomplished so much. Like, I've done all the things I thought would elicit that feeling of vitality, of life, of joy. And none of those things were there. And none of those things were there in my present. We're talking about timelines. And none of those things were there in my future, meaning there was nothing I was looking forward to. And I just knew something was wrong. Something was wrong. And I had like taken the plant medicine. I had like done the meditation retreats, been in therapy, all this stuff. And like nothing was like working. I would get high for a week and I'd just like come down. And as we talk about the timelines, I chose something which may sound obvious, but the medicine I needed to take at that time wasn't mushrooms or ayahuasca. It was putting something into my future that excited me, that made me smile, that gave me a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And so earlier we spoke about, hey, you can go back and change the past, or at least the way you interpret it, and that affects your present. Well, the same, it works the other way as well. I put something in my future, which was I decided Mike Posner, I'm going to walk across America. That goal fired me up. It made me smile, just like it makes me smile now. It's so much so that this thing in the future also changed my present. And it gave me inspiration. It gave me vitality. It gave me joy at times. Definitely gave me excitement. Gave me a little fear too, but I felt alive again. So I don't identify so much with the snake bite victims. I identify with those people looking in the mirror going, I know there's more than this. This can't be it. And this feeling of I have more to give. There's more inside me that I have to offer. And for whatever reason, it's not getting out. I have gifts that are going unused. I want to share what I did when I felt that feeling, because I don't feel it anymore. And so I just want to serve those people. So much of the pain that I have experienced or experienced to this day comes from my love that I know I have inside me being stuck.
100%, bro.
Like there's this love inside and you want to give it, you want to share it, you want to get it out, but you don't because you feel like you can't. You feel like if I give it to this person or thing, it won't be received the way I want it to. I'm scared. So I'll just hold on to it. And you think if I give it to X, Y, or Z, they won't give me back the same amount. And then I'll run out. And this is like another fallacy. You said the word fallacy earlier, because that's looking at love like it's money. It's looking at love through a capitalist lens, which is like, hey, if I give you 10 units of love, now you have 10 units more of love and I have 10 units less. That's not how love works. If I give you love, you have more love and I have more love. We both get more. It's actually kind of a trippy thing when you really think about it, right?
That's cool. I like that.
And so we forget that truth, that love works that way. And so we throttle down. Sometimes I throttle down the amount of love I give. But love is like water. It's got to flow. When it stays still, it gets gross. It starts to be a little green algae in there. And then it's like some little bugs and stuff. It starts to stink. And all of a sudden that love is dangerously looking a lot like hate. It's looking a lot like anger. It's looking a lot like depression. And so that just really inspired me, because you said that you had the freedom to express love. And I think a lot of men feel that, especially men feel that, because we're the ones that give the least amount, like throttle down the most. And we have a lot to give,
So true.
I only thought this has got to be unique to HIV at the time, and I kind of mentally filed it aside to come back to later. And then, come January, February of 2020, when there started to be news reports, people dropping to the ground in Wuhan, China. And
the zombie films. In
right.
Wuhan,
And I traveled to the West Coast in early February of that year, and I saw all these Americans wearing masks at the airport in San Jose, and I was confused. I was like, what's going on? So I had to start looking into it. And of course, it was related to this, alleged new viral disease. And I said, all right, I'm going to do what Carrie Mullis did for HIV. I'm going to find the paper that establishes that there is this virus and that it causes this disease. And I went to the literature and, found at this time, like there was only one paper published, and there was one paper that was in process of being published, but there was an advanced manuscript available to read that wasn't, fully edited yet. So I looked at those papers and I looked at the experiments, and I'm like, these papers don't establish even that this virus exists, and they didn't even purport to show that it caused a disease. These were papers that were just, basically stating they discovered this virus, and in there they said it may be the cause of this new, this disease, which is like the flu. But so I was kind of confused because I'm like, this is weird. They didn't actually do the experiment to discover the virus. They did some other weird experiment in a petri dish in a laboratory. And I'm like, they didn't follow the scientific method here. There was no control experiment. And I was really confused. And then I had to really think about it and put it in context. And I started looking at all other kinds of virus papers. In fact, I even tried to trace every coronavirus paper back to the original paper, which was published in the 60s in a veterinary journal. And I had to enlist the help of a friend whose mother was a librarian who was able to get me a copy of that manuscript. And what I found is that by and large, they did the same bogus experiment in every paper that didn't follow the scientific method and didn't actually find anything resembling a virus in nature. They essentially created things in a laboratory experiment using like genetically modified commercial cell cultures and adding a bunch of toxic ingredients. And I was just like, what are they doing here? And so this was, kind of astonishing, and it made me really nervous to talk about this publicly, because what I realized I was saying here is that this particular virus that they're alleging is causing a new disease, it doesn't even exist. It's a made-up thing. It's like a man-made laboratory artifact, essentially. And I wanted to be sure that I was correct. I did, because I didn't want to, a bunch of people saying, oh, you're an idiot. Look, you missed this little fact here. So when I first put this information out to the public, I had called upon a group of like independent journalists who were, kind of in this alternative space. A lot of them were only talking about like a cult type, conspiracy issues. But I needed people to evaluate what I was saying. So I said, will you all just attend this lecture, and afterwards you can have it, you can put it on your channel, edit it any way you want, but I want you to listen to me really critically, and I want you to, if I'm saying something that it doesn't make sense or it's not true, confront me on it, like challenge me, because I want to know if I'm right or not. And I gave this, like hour-long scientific lecture, and it was like everyone's jaw was dropped at the end. There were some questions to clarify some of the things I said, but everyone was just blown away that it just made perfect sense. So I put it out there to the world, and it kind of resonated with people, and it gave me the energy to keep going. And I continued my research. I looked at many other viruses. I looked at bacteria and other forms of germs, and realized that the whole germ theory industry, and really it was a industrial complex, because all of the business model of modern Western allopathic medicine is really based around germ theory, even if there's illnesses which don't have germs involved. They still adopt the same warfare type of model using, chemical weapons as the treatment. And I began to realize that this whole thing was not true. It's not how nature worked. It was a business model. It was a script, a false paradigm that was used, for many purposes, but certainly resulted in our just misunderstanding of our own health, made us completely reliant and dependent on the medical system and the sort of, I call it the white-coated priests, of which I used to be, completely without any trust, confidence, or belief that they can influence their own health.
Where you sit right now, do you think there ever was any such thing as this virus being passed from person to person?
Well, it's not just that this virus was never shown to exist in nature. It's every single virus that's alleged to cause a disease. You can look at all the experiments done, and the same experiment's been done every time. And these experiments couldn't possibly show a virus the way that they're done, because you'd have to find it in nature. And they don't look in nature. They basically create a man-made, simulation in a laboratory. And they can do this all day long. They can essentially take any person with any expression of illness, take fluid or tissue from their body, do this experiment, and they're guaranteed to find something that they could call a virus. But the thing is, they're not actually finding anything. In fact, the scientist who invented this experiment, his name was John Enders, and he actually won a Nobel Prize because he was instrumental in manufacturing the polio vaccine. And the technique that he used to manufacture the polio vaccine is exactly the technique that became later, not by his direction, but by other scientists after he won the Nobel Prize, to give alleged evidence that a virus has been discovered. But in the first paper that Enders published with this technique, he actually included a control sample. And it was measles, where he took the secretions, the snot from patients with measles, put them in a petri dish, didn't look for the virus in the snot at all. Just took whatever was in the snot, which is, who knows what's in there, but it's a lot of junk, a lot of chemicals, a lot of cells, bacteria, fungus, human, all kinds of stuff. Put it in this cell culture dish, and the cells showed some damage. But he also took the snot from someone without measles and put it in the same cell culture, not the same exact one, but a similar one with the same ingredients. And the cells in there also showed damage. And he wrote this in a paper that there were unknown factors causing the cell damage. And also wrote that you couldn't learn from what happened in this cell culture simulation. It didn't tell you what happened in an actual measles patient. He wrote that right in the conclusion. But those findings were just ignored, and all the subsequent virology papers used this procedure but never did a control, because they knew the control would also show, the evidence that they were saying meant was a virus. They had already given up looking directly in the patient for the virus, because they tried that in the 1940s for many years and were never able to actually find a particle in the person's body that they could say was a virus. They just found tons of different particles that were all mixed together, because when our cells are damaged and dying, they break into particles. Just like we would take out the trash, we put it in trash bags so it doesn't spread out and make a mess. We don't just pile up all our trash on the curb, right? We put them in a bag inside of a can so it's compartmentalized. When our cells, die and become trash, they also go into little bags, essentially. And those are referred to as exosomes, or they have other names when they're admitted to come from us.
I want you to imagine that you're sitting there with this capacity to perceive all of that line that potentially extends from mom and all of that line that potentially extends from dad, right? Because you're not just looking at one parent or one parental connection. Most people, if I was going to throw out an average, are looking at about anywhere between 4 and 60 potential parents for whatever experience that they want to have on Earth, right? Part of the recipe of what you're looking for are those traits that are running through lines. So you put so much energy and emphasis into what family lines you are going to come into and at what time. You are, by coming into this specific life, inheriting all of that. You're not just coming in being like, oh, this is going to be a one-off life. You're literally saying, I'm going to join my consciousness with that stream that is still going. So literally the first person who is in your line, let's pretend there's a first, okay? The first person who is in your line is still alive. That person is still alive in you. So when you are looking at things in terms of ancestry, it reads like a being who has been living for a very long time. And there are aspects of that consciousness that pop in and out of existence, those being individuals, of course. So you are literally, assuming you don't have kids yet, you are the farthest point in the progression of the consciousness of that family line. It's literally an organism. It will look like that on a non-physical level. So you're essentially, everything you do in your life is essentially the expansion path for your family. And it doesn't matter whether you're adopted, doesn't matter whether you don't like your family, you cannot divorce them. It's not possible. It's what you chose into. And you chose into this not only to pull those very strong elements of mastery and talent through you, because you knew that would assist your particular choice for this life, whether it is, a career you were meant to have or, something that you were meant to do, right? Usually is what people are choosing based off of. You also wanted to take those detrimental patterns, which are themselves running through that family line, and alter them so as to essentially progress the family more, better, further. You're like really up an alley of one of my favorite things to look at ever. You can see that I'm like perked right up on this concept.
I love it. And what about the risks of opening up those dimensions to other malevolent energies?
Oh, it's a big risk. This is one of the reasons why I feel like setting and choosing, a person who is part of these things is so important. It's one of the reasons why I don't believe in recreational use of shamanic medicines at all, because you're interacting with these different dimensional fields that open up the door in a very big way for a lot of non-physical forces, which people cannot perceive, quite frankly. So if they can't even perceive them, how are they going to be able to account for them? So choosing obviously very well about the place that you're doing things in and about the person who's holding the space when you're going through a process like that is very, very important. It scares the crap out of me that we're kind of toying with this, So, really good shamans are going to hold the space. I mean, on a non-physical level as well, they're going to be tapped in enough on that level to be able to do so. Not only that, very, very good shamans. A lot of them have developed the capacity to enter into other people's journey without the medicine. A great many of them will take it so that they are able to join other people and keep tabs on where people are at all times. If people have an issue with like what it costs to pay a shaman, a lot of people do. They're like, I don't want to spend that money. No, you got to spend that money. Why? Because that's exactly what you're paying them for. You're paying them to keep an eye on you on a non-physical level and make sure that there's none of these entities that are entering in to cause havoc in that moment. And if I asked you how much is that worth, most people would be like, okay, yeah, let's go.
How much is your soul worth?
Yeah. Let's go to the place where I can really guarantee that the people have their crap together,
100%.
Those people are going to have a very good protocol for the way that you need to do things beforehand. It's not going to be just, come over on Saturday, man, and like we're going to do this. It's not going to look like that. Everything's going to be very intentional. And so is their guidance of what needs to happen with you. And so is their picking of the place with which to do this work.
So you had spiritual gifts when you were a kid that you were aware of. You've spoken about how there were some challenges with that, of being in an environment, in a culture where that wasn't welcomed or understood.
Yep.
When you started working with plant medicines, did any of that reconcile? Because I don't know, I get the sense that you would feel like, oh, I'm home, kind of like, did it start to make more sense to you? Because you're now I don't know, in community and in situations wherein your gifts are more clearly understood by you or the people with whom you're sharing space?
I mean, for me, medicines are probably received very differently than they are for other people. From talking to people, I gather that what I'm looking at on a normal daily basis would be comparable to what somebody would see if they, took a whole lot of DMT. It was just all day long. So what changed for me is that when people were doing these medicines, they were suddenly perceiving a world that I have my foot in all day, every day, and was very much alone with, because, when I was sharing the kind of things I was perceiving in a room, it was a very different reaction that I was getting from the majority of people. It was like, what do you mean there are all these shapes? What do you mean by shapes and colors? Then somebody would do, ayahuasca or something, come off and be like, oh my gosh, like everything, there were fractals and everything. And I'm like, yeah, that's how I see things. So I did feel a greater sense of connection with other people and less of a sense of loneliness. It wasn't really, what it is that when I'm on these medicines, obviously I'm going on very deep journeys, but I'm able to get a relationship with the consciousness of the plant itself, right? Which is the majority of why I'm engaging with these things, because they're very profound teachers that have very interesting perspectives. And by partaking in them, it's like you're sitting in the room with a teacher, right? And yeah, I think I loved that, right? I love that, but it's not like that was too much different from like what I'm experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. I more feel like these medicines are bringing people into my world for once.
I recently signed up for this subscription service called Quantum Upgrade, and it's been a major game changer for my energy, EMF resilience, and the overall feeling in our home. Let me explain how it works. Quantum energy is the energy that supports all life in the universe. It's nonlinear, non-local, and has an immense potential for health when it's harnessed and directed to you or into your living environment. Through many years of research and development, Quantum Upgrade created one of the world's most potent sources of usable quantum energy. So when you sign up for their service, Quantum Upgrade associates your home, car, phone, business, and even your pet with this energy. The energy you receive with the Quantum Upgrade is a high consciousness field that you can even customize on the fly. For example, I like to set different booster levels at specific times, such as before a podcast recording or during sleep. It's pretty awesome. The Quantum Upgrade energy streaming service has already been studied and tested by independent institutes, doctors, and labs with phenomenal results in placebo-controlled double-blind studies. It's been shown to improve red and white blood cells and even reverse stages 1 and 2 of blood clotting in only a few minutes. You can try it right now risk-free with a 15-day free trial by visiting quantumupgrade.io. All you got to do is use the code Luke15 to activate your free trial. Again, you'll find it at quantumupgrade.io.
I'll say this because I think it will just help people kind of frame this up in their mind as well. There are 4, in the book, I talk about 4 levels of importance in any relationship, but you'll see that some of these levels don't even relate. They're not even a relationship. But it's like you need these 4 things for something to be something truly, truly valuable. The first is admiration, right? It's level 1, which is to say not important. It's important that we admire someone we end up with, but it's not when we admire someone in some way from afar or think they're hot or think they're charismatic or there's something about them. There's nothing there. It's just us in some way thinking they're great. The second level of importance is mutual attraction. That's where you have 2 people who both like each other. It's not just in one direction. We call that chemistry, connection, whatever. Then the third level is commitment. That's 2 people actually saying yes to each other. That's a stage that people often forget is really important for something to be that valuable. They get so caught up with the mutual attraction they have with someone then that they forget that this person's not saying yes. This person's not saying, I want to be with you. This person's not saying, I want to be exclusive. This person's not saying, let's build something, you and me. You just have an amazing time when you're together and it feels like there's this incredible connection. And so now you're going, Matt, what can I do about this? I'm telling you, this is like the person for me. And it's like, what's the problem? Well, they just say they're not ready. Then you really have nothing. We have to get out of this idea that this is so important because you feel something. Without the yes, it's not that important. If someone said yes to you and you're in a committed relationship and then they get taken from you, they get hit by a car tomorrow, that's tragic. That's real grief. But if someone is out there that you think is the one and they're right now shopping at Target and they're existing and they just don't want to be with you, then limit your grieving.
Right. Well, by definition, they are not the one, clearly, because they're only the one for you. You're not the one for them.
Yeah,
otherwise they would have made time and space for you to pursue.
And it doesn't make that idea of you, like unrequited love, I think is just a complete myth in the first place. Like, it's not, love is this thing, you're going to share it. It's not, I love them so much if only they could realize. That's a different thing. That's idealization. It's creating a story in your mind about what this should be, when in the real world, in this world, it's not that thing. So it's kind of just science fiction.
Oh my God, I've totally done that.
Same, like everyone has. And I think that the wake-up call is that it's a story we've created. It's not reality. If it was reality, it would be. So we can't live science fiction stories for our love life. We have to live real stories if we actually want to create something real. So the third stage is commitment, but commitment isn't enough on its own either. Unfortunately, we think like, love is all you need. If you just have someone who says yes and you're committed together, it will work. But the fourth level is compatibility. And if you guys are not compatible, then you can find that you're both saying yes, but you're not able to make this relationship work. You're certainly not able to make it work to where you're happy. And you only need to imagine extremes of that for it to be true. If one person thinks that lying all the time is okay and another person really values honesty, then you have a fundamental level of incompatibility that's going to make this relationship a living hell for you. Christopher Hitchens used to say it's more important how you think than what you think.
That's cool.
And finding someone who thinks how you think is that I think ends up being something that's quite important, because if you are with someone who doesn't think how you think, if they don't think through things in certain similar ways, you can wind up feeling very, very lonely in your relationship. And I'd had that experience in my life where I brought up a challenge that I had with something in general. And it was very evident to me that even if that person thought differently about it, they couldn't even understand the way that I was thinking through the problem, or the way that I was skeptical about the situation or the challenge. It's just how I was thinking about it. And as a result, me feeling alone. Like, we are speaking different languages. Me and my wife, Audrey, we do not end up at the same conclusions about everything. But how we think is very similar, which means that whenever we're having the conversation, I never feel alone, even if she says yes to all of that way of thinking, and I have arrived at a different conclusion as a result. Like, that's okay, but the how of the thinking beneath all of that, that's where I feel not alone in the world. Not that we've, having been through the arguments, not ended up in the same place.
Yeah. When you were speaking of teamwork, it brought to mind this idea of, that placing high value on the team. And when I think of team, I just think of the relationship as almost its own living, breathing entity apart from the two people in relationship, right? Do you subscribe to that? I mean, do you think that valuing the relationship as a tool of growth, as its own sort of autonomous energy is important?
Yeah, I do. I think that that's a beautiful way of putting it. It's kind of if you make your North Star the good of the relationship, and what makes that better and more authentic and filled with more love, and then you're no longer, if you're in relation to someone, then it can become two egos where I'm trying to be right about this, or you're trying to be right about this, and then we're just butting heads, because our North Star is, your North Star is you want to be right, and my North Star is I want to be right. But if our North Star is the relationship, and how do we make that as strong as it can be, then we're both looking at this thing trying to make it better. We're both trying to solve the same problem, which is, how do we improve our relationship? How do we resolve this for the good of that relationship? Whereas if the problem we're trying to solve is, if the problem I'm trying to solve is how I end up being right here, and that's the problem you're trying to solve, then we're both trying to solve a different problem.
Yeah.
And we're constantly going to be fighting about that.
That's good. That's good. That's very true.
The answers come from innovators.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you on the term conspiracy theorist too. It's a cheap way to slander and discredit someone who's thinking critically and asking questions, right?
Right. So we should talk about, I think we should talk about 6 terms that are, I think, meant to injure. They are pejorative, and they are clearly designed to establish a power dynamic of one person exerting power over another. And they were all extensively used during Nazi Germany. So anybody who wants to throw around these terms, they can take it right back to the Third Reich. And they are misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, anti-science, anti-vaxxer, and conspiracy theorist. Those are all terms by which the person who uses them is aspiring to gain power and control over the other person. And they are attempting to push their point of view onto others. And by definition, that's propaganda.
I love it. So true. So what was it like for you as you started to see holes in the way these institutions were approaching the issue? You know, I guess going back to my earlier question, you know, what were some of the first red flags for you that something is amiss? And was there a decision point at which you decided out of your own integrity to speak out and be willing to take the arrows? And what's it been like to take those arrows? It's kind of a multifaceted question, but...
I saw it early, and don't forget, I was in the orthodoxy. In many ways, I still am. President of a major medical society, editor of 2 major journals. In 2019, I was the named endowed visiting lecturer at Harvard School of Medicine in 2 major departments. 2019. My Wikipedia page was scintillating with accolades. So I was fully within the orthodoxy. I mean, I'm approaching 700 citations in the National Library of Medicine. I've lectured at the New York Academy of Sciences, European Medicine Agencies. 2007, I was asked to present to the Congressional Oversight Panel on the FDA on a major product label expansion on a group of drugs. So people knew my name all over the world. But I can tell you, in early 2020, when the pandemic unfolded and we started to see people die all over the world, within a few weeks, I became very uncomfortable as I was messaging my colleagues about treating patients to help them avoid 2 bad outcomes, hospitalization and death. And I saw my colleagues retreat. They fell into silence. None of them volunteered to come forward and say, yes, let's innovate. Let's work to help people survive this illness. I think within a few days of former President Trump announcing this national emergency, Moderna said we have a vaccine within a few days. We're like, you do? That was fast? How did you do it?
Right.
And then we started to realize and how things became unwound. And boy, look where we are now. But you're talking to right now the only public figure with medical authority in the world who questioned in writing in a widely read journal the entire COVID-19 vaccine development program. You're looking at it. There wasn't a single chief of medicine or single chief of infectious disease, public health official, president, premier, or senator, or congressman who questioned the vaccines. No one questioned them. No one questioned them. In an opinion editorial that I wrote in The Hill, which is a widely read journal for the House, the Senate, and the White House, the title of an August 2020 op-ed was "The Great Gamble of the COVID-19 Vaccine Development Program." What a gamble this was, to take the genetic code for the lethal part of the virus, this Wuhan spike protein, this spike protein that we now know was the target of bioengineering, intentional bioengineering, to make the virus more lethal and more infectious, to take the genetic code for the worst part of the virus and then install that genetic code in human bodies with having no idea how much of that lethal protein is going to be produced in each person, with having no idea where that genetic code goes in the body, how long does it last, and how does the body ever get rid of this spike protein? It was the worst idea ever. And yet people have come forward and said, well, they invented messenger RNA. In fact, Carrico and Wiseman just received the Nobel Prize for modifying messenger RNA, pseudo-uridinating it, essentially making it nearly indestructible for the human body. And so here we have Nobel laureates who receive this award for their invention. And at the same time, there are candlelight vigils held all over Scandinavia protesting, saying this Nobel Prize is leading to human disaster. It's an astonishing historical revelation. Normally, we cheer a Nobel Prize. It's some advancement. But this one, people knew immediately was a Nobel Prize that was leading to harm to the world, not benefiting the world.
We learned all the deep stuff about fluoride. I mean, the rabbit hole just kept going deeper and deeper and deeper. And it was at one of these conferences that there was a guy that would show up to multiple conferences. His name was Dr. Jesse Partridge. And he would always walk around and say, you know, one of these days you guys are going to learn that you can heal pretty much everything with just meditation, sunlight, the simplicity of healing, teaching people why they have disease to begin with. And urine, which he didn't call it a therapy, okay, which we call it urine therapy, but in reality, it's a golden alchemical nectar, which is the highest vibrations. Like Einstein and Tesla said, we are energy and vibration. By the way, last year they did a study in India, and they had a liter of urine, which 1 liter of urine produced 8.6 kilowatts of electricity and ran a medium-sized house for 8 hours. That's how much power is in a liter of your urine, 8.6 kilowatts. It's an energy thing. It's your body's ability to create a medicine and a vibrational plasma that can be used for multiple different things. And so that was my first introduction, and I really started studying it, which was 30 years ago. Ultimately, we went around for 2 years and presented our research, and then we were followed around in black cars, and we opened up our own cancer clinic in Houston in 1999. We treated a bunch of movie stars, the royal family, and ultimately we got shut down by the FDA. And, you know, I've had death threats and everything else. But urine, the reason I started coming back out with urine therapy or the urine plasma and how effective it is because I was part of the COVID task force during the pandemic. There were 27 of us that were working for the government and under Trump's administration. And when we were researching all the stuff at the beginning stages, when we were researching stuff all over the world, probably 90% of the world's population didn't have access to herbs, and they didn't have access to stuff when they were completely freaked out and fearful that this thing was, you know, coming into existence. We all knew that it was planned from a long time ago. As a matter of fact, in 2016, I started looking at the documents and looking at the transhumanism agenda and looking at their plan of action, these, power-hungry, control-hungry individuals that are basically running the world. And I saw the nanotechnology and what Big Pharma and all these people were doing. They were trying to harness energy from the body, and they were trying to produce these wide body area networks and this nanotechnology and this lipid nanoparticle technology. And I had finished all my research on it, and I was trying to warn everybody, guys, this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to create us, transform us into a half cyborg, half human, so they can control us. And what we noticed when we were part of the advisory board, the COVID task force, was that what was really going on behind the scenes, I'm not even really supposed to talk about this because I had to sign an NDA like 2 inches thick. What was really going on behind the scenes was I'm always about simplicity. Like, everything that I did is about the simplest ways to heal yourself, take control of your own self. The true definition of a doctor is a teacher, not a prescriber, empowering you to take control of your own health and detoxify. Ultimately, our research in the 90s, our presentation was all disease. Every single disease, even if you want to say mental illness and everything else, is caused by two things. This was our conclusion: a toxic external environment and a toxic internal environment. That's it. Your external environment is people you're hanging around with, what you're watching on TV, the mold in your house, the shampoos you're using, anything in your external environment that's going to lower your vibrational frequencies or be toxic to your mind or toxic to your body or toxic to your soul in any way. And the internal environment is obviously anything you put inside of yourself.
And also, for anyone listening or watching to whom that sounds unbelievable, it's easily provable by just observing animals in nature that don't have Alzheimer's, don't have diabetes, don't have cancer, don't have all the things, right?
You can when it comes down to it, you can say that you are the root cause, but you just don't know it because you've been manipulated and you've been brainwashed since you were a baby. Every single thing I tell people, like, what if I told you that every aspect of your life from the time you were born, even before you're born, even when you're in the womb and when you're conceived, has been engineered and you don't even know it? From the time you're born is exactly opposite of how you should be born. Your natural birth, outside in nature. Now you're under bright lights. You have a doctor there that's, someone you're scared. There's a lot of noise there. There's bad energy around there. Then you go home and then you start watching all these manipulated cartoons on TV. The whole educational system is completely engineered. The whole political system is engineered. It's like the Truman Show, really. The whole agricultural system, the whole government system, all the wars are engineered. Like, basically every single thing is engineered. Even the foods you choose, most of the time you've been engineered to choose those foods. And to get you addicted and to get you looking and focusing and distracted outside of yourself instead of focusing inside of yourself. One thing I learned when I was a kid, I started studying all the different religions out there, and I noticed one thing that was in every single book, and it was the kingdom of heaven is within. And then when I went around, started asking all the preachers and all of the, spiritual, people that were running the churches, can you explain to me this sentence, like the kingdom of heaven is within? What does that mean? I want to learn how to access that. Nobody could answer that question for me. That took me on a whole nother journey to, studying, great philosophers and spiritual teachers and different gurus and to deal with that. Trauma and suffering and pain is not always a bad thing. Trauma and suffering and pain can be the most transformational thing that you ever go through in your entire life. And that's what we're going through right now as a planet during this great awakening. We're going through a period of pain and trauma and suffering, but people are looking at that and saying, so for me, like, this is the best time ever right now. This is awesome, these times that we're in. there's just different ways to view that. You can view it as, oh, pain and trauma and suffering, or you can view it as pain and trauma and suffering as growth and awakening and enlightenment and transformation. And that's what a certain amount of people are going through, because if you look at right now on the planet, you're being forced to transform or you're just going to be out. If you look at light, for example, I mean, basically you could break it down to, we have 3 levels right now of consciousness on the planet. We have the black level at the bottom, which is there's no light and darkness, right? And that's you're vibrating at a very low energy. You're completely zombified. You're probably watching CNN, and I'm not judging anybody, but this is just how energy and vibration works. You're not awake yet because you've allowed yourself to be in this situation. Then you have the middle area, which is gray, right? You have half darkness and half light in the gray area. That energy vibration is getting larger and larger right now since the pandemic. Pandemic was actually a great thing that happened, because now people are actually seeing the truth and they're waking up. You have to go through pain and trauma and suffering to wake up. The people I've interviewed after their cancer treatment, the drug addicts that have recovered that I've worked with over the years, I asked them, or even interviewed, how did you kick the habit? They always say, I lost everything. I hit rock bottom. I lost my wife. I lost my girlfriend. I lost my sons. I lost all my money. I lost my job. I was homeless. I went through the most pain, trauma, and suffering I've ever gone through in my entire life. And then something shifted. And I started going through this transformation. And I've never touched drugs again, never gambled again, anything like that. I've been clean for 10 years. Pain and trauma, and same with cancer patients that have gone the natural route. So you can go the medical route, you're going to have pain and trauma and suffering, and you're going to eventually die, most likely. Or you go the natural route, you're going to have pain and trauma and suffering, and you're going to survive, but not survive, transform as a human being. I believe that a lot of these symptoms and diseases that are put upon us are for exactly that. For us to wake up, for us to recognize what we're doing in our life that's not consciously effective for growing spiritually, mentally, and physically. And so these symptoms or these diseases are there for us to stop all the distractions in our life and to focus back on us as who we really are as a human. And so they all say that cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me because it transformed my life. And so that's what we're going through right now on a mass level of consciousness, is the earth is changing, and this is the Great Awakening. And this is, we all, including me, have had family members that got the bioweapon, that we've all had like some form of pain or trauma or suffering, but we have to grow through that. We have to become better. We have to raise our consciousness level. And it's also another reason why people are waking up and their consciousness is waking up right now, and they're hating their job and they're shifting to, I feel my calling is to help people now.
If you haven't noticed in the past 4 years that Big Pharma doesn't have an interest in promoting health, then you're not listening to podcasts like this one. When it comes to real wellness, sometimes traditional interventions are still the best. That's why I've been a fan of this company Shen Blossom for years. With a deep respect for nature, Shen Blossom is committed to your health, providing some of the most innovative and skillfully crafted herbal extract and traditional foods that are typically not available to the general public. They offer traditional sake extracts, Japanese skincare products, and one-of-a-kind herbal formulas. One of my favorites that I've been using for years is their green MSM. And since MSM enhances the absorption of other nutrients, they got the genius idea to add a broad spectrum of greens from plants and sea vegetables, plus tonic and purifying herbs. I've never found anything quite like it. You'll find all that and much more at shenblossom.com, and make sure to use the code Luke to save 10% off. That's ShenBlossom, shenblossom.com. Oh, and don't forget their delicious food, too. I am crazy about their nori sprinkle and toasted sesame oil. Honestly, you have to taste it to really appreciate how much richer and flavorful it is than the oil you're used to from the store. So again, that's shenblossom.com, and your code is Luke.
If everybody knew the earth was flat. Sounds weird, but people would be grounded. They understand that there's lies out there. All of the politicians, all the corruption in politics, all of the whole medical, freedom, nonsense that's been going on. All of that is destroyed when you wake up to, you're at the center of creation. There is no other choice than there is a creator. I lived my whole life not believing there was a creator, believing in evolution. I lived the whole thing. And it's because of the heliocentric model made me laugh at religion, made me laugh at spirituality. But when I discovered that the earth is intelligently designed, incredibly intelligently designed, there is no other choice than there is a creator. I draw the line right there. I said, once you know there's a creator, that's your personal relationship. It's none of anyone else's business. And that's it. So and that's what the elite don't want, because they can't control a population that knows there's a higher power. Now they can get to someone to go, you know what? Maybe there isn't a God. Maybe the Big Bang is, not just made up by a Jesuit priest, right? Then you can control the person. If all the politicians knew that the earth was flat and there's a creator, all of the laws that they make would have to follow natural law, God's law. So what they did is they created a satanic ball, all the 666s in the model, we're orbiting at 66,600 miles an hour. It curves at 0.66 feet per mile or whatever. It's crazy. At 0.666 feet per mile. There's so many 666s. It's insane. It's endless. And that's just, I find that fascinating. Once you see all of that, it changes everything. I had a point, but I lost it. It's going to come back.
Well, it's actually, you're going into one of the biggest questions I and other people have is, why would so much effort be put into creating this false construct and this lie? Why is there a globe in every classroom, and every cartoon has a globe, and every movie studio's animation has, it's just why did they put so much effort? And if they did, and if what you're saying is true, then it would make sense to me that cutting us off from God would be the absolute best way to control our minds.
Absolutely. If they create,
because then the state becomes God.
They create the satanic ball. They put you on it. It's a ball filled with fear and lack. And if you live on there and use their fake fiat currency, you have to play by their rules. But if you unplug from that, put your feet back down on God's world, realize that you're at the center of creation, they have no control over you, right? We don't need to protest. We don't need to riot. We don't need to take down the government. We need to ignore them so they don't exist. They would just be powerless. The only power that they have is the power that we have in our imagination for them. They're just a big lie. They think government, man, and no God, right? It's God, man. I don't even know government belongs down there, right? Govern is to control, meant is the mind. Literally, they're here to control us, and people. A lot of people say, "Oh, what different?" I'm only one person. I can't do anything. There's nothing I can do. That's not true. One person with the truth is stronger than a million liars. And you just have to stand in your truth. You have to understand it. You have to understand where you are, your true power, that your thoughts create your reality. Everything you have in your life, you thought into existence. Everything.
It's true.
Yeah. The space shuttle was a blimp, a helium blimp. The external rocket, the tank, is a balloon. It could be in the Macy's Day Parade, right? And it just goes up and it goes out of sight, and then they recover it. We actually have, now the story is, the shuttle's connected to the external rocket. It goes up. It lets go. That thing's still going 25,000 miles an hour up, with the astronauts on it. And then the external tank falls back to Earth so fast that it deatomizes and burns up before it hits the ground.
Oh, come on. Is that really the official story?
Check this out. The astronauts on the shuttle were filming it falling back to Earth. They're going up at 25,000 miles an hour, and they're filming something that weighs 20 tons that's falling. How long could you keep that in frame?
I don't think you could have it in frame at all. That's
Not even for a microsecond.
Can you get a bullet in midair in a frame?
Oh, it's going faster than a bullet.
Oh, man.
It's going faster than a bullet, right? But they filmed it for minutes.
I don't know how I'm going to process this conversation.
So check us out. This gets worse. This gets worse.
Honestly,
so they film it, and it's not that far above the clouds. Like, when's this thing going to start burning up? And then you're watching it, and all of a sudden we see a piece of tissue paper float by, like showing what speed it's really moving at, which is not fast at all. Like a piece of tissue, like a litter that came out of a helicopter that was filming this balloon or something, right? But then I saw this weird anomaly where I'm like, what was that? And I slowed it down. I rotated the camera. I rotated the image. I cranked up the levels, and it was a weird cloaked looking quad airplane of some sort. It looked like a quadcopter or something. It looked, I call it the blimp recovery vehicle. There's no question, no doubt. Don't know what it is. It's some sort of aircraft. Proving that thing wasn't falling, proving that it's not what it was, right? End of story.
How do we explain when you see footage of astronauts in a zero gravity environment? Now, I've seen a lot of these videos where they slow it down and you see cables, you see
cables pulling on their shirt. Sometimes they're in zero G flights, zero G flight, the parabolic flight. You get about 40 seconds of weightlessness. Well, that's the ones we know about. Maybe they have ones that go much higher and you get several minutes of weightlessness, right? It's just free falling. Go higher, you free fall longer.
Because in some of the videos, you'll see the women with long hair and their hair is like standing up and then you realize it's hairspray.
Yeah. Well, think about this. In the military, you ever see like a fighter jet pilot? Stand-up guys, in shape, smart as a whip, buzzed head, right? Look at all the astronauts. They're the dumbest people ever. Look at Dom Pettit. We lost the technology, but we don't have the technology to go back again. And he's like, "What if there's a leak?" Well, then there's a leak. I don't know. We'd probably. I mean, he's a moron. I'm actually featuring a video of him. It's so funny. There's so much. It's you hear that they're applying for astronauts. There's 4,000 applicants, and they picked Don Pettit.
Right.
Don Pettit. Right. He's. And maybe they picked him because he's so stupid. He believes I say none of the astronauts, they're all in on it except maybe Don Pettit. He might believe he went to space because somebody told him he did.
Well, back to the idea of, how could this many people be in on it?
The only
way that makes sense to me is kind of a pyramid structure of information, right? Where you have only at the apex of the pyramid people in the know, and then there's compartmentalized bits of information going down to the broad base of the pyramid where your average guy selling t-shirts at the NASA
he doesn't
amusement park
the people
is fully on board, and his boss and his boss and his boss are all on board too, and that at a certain level someone's going like, oh, this is all just Hollywood fakery.
We interviewed someone from the control room during the that was in there during the Apollo missions, and his quote, he said, "We do so many simulations that when the real thing happens, we can't even tell the difference because we've practiced that many times." Or maybe that's just another simulation and they told you it was real. Right? The simulations, they do it so many times that they're so good at it that when they do the real one, they can't tell the difference.
Huh.
Is that a brainwashed person or what?
Man.
Yeah.
What do you think about Elon Musk and fake X?
The 5 milligrams of Nano-Gold that's in every sachet is literally trillions and trillions and trillions of gold nanoparticles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so 5 milligrams, to give you the correct number, it's actually 10 to the power of 13. So that's 1 with 13 zeros after it. That's how many nanoparticles are actually in there. So even though we recommend a dosage of 5 milligrams a day, if you were just to put 1 sachet in 64 ounces of water and drink it over a month, you would still be getting those nanoparticles going through the blood-brain barrier. And the beautiful thing with it passing through the blood-brain barrier and getting into your system is it gets through to the amygdala, and that's where all of our emotions and our fear and flight response is.
Fucking amygdala.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been trying to calm that thing down for 30 years.
Yeah. Well, this is why I'm so passionate about the product, and people even just getting small amounts in there is it starts to alleviate a lot of that emotion, a lot of that fear, and balances it out. So that's the first thing that the gold's doing. It's giving us that solid foundation really of like peace and groundedness. And then it can start to regulate those higher processes. So it'll start to get into the cerebral spinal fluid. It'll start to get into the medulla oblongata so that's the part of the brain that's regulating like our bodily functions, like our heartbeat, our blood pressure. And so once we have a certain quotient of light within the body, it will actually start to regulate those secretions up and down the spinal column as well. And that's when our interaction with life starts to really transform.
Wow.
Yeah.
So epic.
And I think it's really important to recognize like the system's there, it's running. There's some beautiful people in it. There's some people that may have, alternative ways of still wanting to control or hang on to things that they're doing. However, we don't want to just strip that down without also having those new structures to go into, because it would be chaotic and it wouldn't be a pretty place. The earth wouldn't be a pretty place to be. So I think it's this beautiful period at the moment where there's enough people aware now, and more people becoming aware every day, that there's better ways to do things. And because of the decentralized nature, people can do things, and the information is recorded, whether it's saved on hard drives or saved on a blockchain or saved in the field.
Yeah, yeah.
Those new systems are being built rapidly. There's some brilliant minds, some beautiful people building those. And it's just going to be a transfer of energy from the system that's becoming redundant and people aren't resonating with it anymore across to those new open systems. And I think that's a much kinder way for us to transition forward rather than, trying to pull it down. And often as you try and build things yourself, you realize like it's not that easy. Sometimes you've got to compromise on things as well. So, it's
also, it requires collaboration.
Totally.
Community.
Yeah, totally.
There's very few people that can do a thing of substance entirely on their own.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And finding the solutions.
Yeah.
Because it's super easy to kind of, start waking up and say, oh, wow, they're doing this with their money, or they've done this because of this. It's like, what's the solution for that? Let's focus and build that solution. And putting our attention there is something really beautiful and beneficial, I believe.
Here in the old USA, a positive trend I'm seeing emerge out of the chaos over the past few years is the trend of people living off grid, homesteading, building intentional communities, homeschooling, producing their own food. I mean, I'm watching people on social media do this stuff and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so domesticated. I'm so like, do you have any experience with plant medicines and things in that realm? I think I might have asked you that before. That's not your lane. Thus far.
No, I appreciate the power of the plant medicine and the transformational impacts it can have and accessing the subconscious. That's what the gold's doing as well. So the gold's actually, because it goes into that amygdala and into the medulla oblongata, it's actually so that it's tapping into those nerve endings and all of that subconscious to release a lot of the causal conditioning that's there. So it's doing it in a way that is kind of, obviously take a plant medicine and you're in that state and you get shown beautiful teachings or things that you can look at. Well, the subconscious, when it's releasing that conditioning or that programming, is doing a very similar thing. So it's doing it with light from the sun as the medicine. if you will. And as you're doing that over time and building up that quotient of light in the vehicle, then you're working through that layer of purification in a different way, in a way that it resonates much more to me to do it that way. I mean, the plant medicine and everything on the earth is getting its source from the sun. So for me, it's almost like a more direct path.
That's cool.
To the light.
That's cool. Yeah, thinking about those cacti sitting out in the desert sun and how much energy and data they're building from that sunlight. Yeah, that makes sense. So you're more of you're like a cacti walking around the planet, doing your sun gazing and grounding and drinking the structured water. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think why I asked you this time, and I asked you before and I forgot the answer, is sometimes I meet people that are really tapped in. I mean, I often meet people like you doing what I do here, and I'll intuit erroneously that they've at least at some point worked with psychedelics because they're so tapped in. They have a certain air about them or a certain consciousness. It's hard for me to imagine that they found another way to get there, you know? and it's a great reminder that there are many ways and how important it is to follow your intuition and what path speaks to you, you know? Which for me for a very long time was just breath work, meditation, Kundalini yoga. I mean, I made a lot of progress, a lot of healing, a lot of understanding, a lot of expanded consciousness in those ways. And I probably would have been fine if I would have just kept doing that forever. And then as nature called and I went down another path and that's been great too, you know, but I appreciate the fact that there are many windows that lead into the mansion, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. It's, I mean, one way or another, we've got to do it is how I see it.
Right.
Like the stuff that's stored in there that's, it can be this life, it can be genetic codes that are passed through our DNA, it can be past lives for us, but there's all of that causal conditioning that has to be unwound, if you will, so that we actually have that solid platform to then be able to move forward from. But once it's still all there and we're in that stressful state or that fearful state, then we can't actually access those higher processes. It's got to kind of come out. It's got to purify first. And that, you know, can take lifetimes. So I think it's the power of seeing through that with a plant medicine or with the gold or with fasting, you know, and different other things you can do, like a Vipassana or a Vision Quest. I think they also help.
Many of you listening will probably know that Nikola Tesla was onto some next-level research and invention. Well, unfortunately, a lot of technology that can really help people has been suppressed. So I'm always curious to learn about the latest health devices on the energy medicine scene. And that's why when my friend Brandon offered to let me try out his Therify device, I was stoked. The Therify is a frequency device that uses a unique method of transforming electricity, just as Tesla himself discovered. It combines electrostatic and electromagnetic fields with light, effectively creating a human battery charger. It's wild. Therify sessions rapidly but gently stimulate the body's natural healing processes, reducing inflammation, relieving pain, and boosting the immune system. And I gotta say, my first session left me feeling that ideal combination of relaxed, rejuvenated, yet energized, and I was instantly obsessed. You can get yours by visiting therifyusa.com and use the code Luke to save $333. That's THERAPHIUSA, therifyusa.com, and you'll also get free shipping on your Therify unit. Oh, and heads up, while you're there, check out the Therify developer Paul Harris's newest creation, the Quantify. It's a unique alternative to lifestyle machines that's compact and super easy to use. And while the original Therify device is geared toward healing practitioners, the Quantify is geared toward professional and home use. So if you happen to own a healing or biohacking center or something like that, this technology could be an incredible addition to your services. Again, that's therifyusa.com, and the code is Luke.
And I believe that's super important for us to meditate on as humanity is why are we living in an intangible world? Like what happened to create a daily lived experience that's not tangible, and that it takes something like a death, which is ultimately, like you describe, a transformation of energetic reality, to remind us that we're living in this abstract reality that is not tangible. And it's such a gift, I believe, to feel past that veil of this intangible, abstract belief system that we call life. And a human right now is so fundamentally trained by an early age, somewhere around age 3-4 years old, as you start to have a neurologic system that perceives difference. When we're born, we don't see that way. A child will look at you out of the womb above your head. And so it's not looking at your physical body, it's looking at your energetic body. It's seeing the entire, physical reality without the construct of the human visual cortex as the dominant experience. It's experiencing your ultraviolet, your infrared, it's experiencing your entire aura, because the brain development hasn't gotten to the point where it can actually see. It takes weeks and months of training the brain into understanding the visual cortex for it to start to dumb itself down. Learning is a process of trimming neurologic connections. And so we're in the womb, we have the maximum number of neurologic connections in the human brain that we'll ever have. And the moment we are beginning to see patterns, and that can begin in the womb with your mother's heartbeat, her respiratory rate, you're starting to learn, you're starting to have physical inputs, you're having experiential learning of what it now feels like to have a physical body that can perceive reality in a finite fashion. And so it's interesting to imagine that your mother's heartbeat may have been your first sense of a finite reality. Up until that time, you only had an infinite sense of reality. And suddenly you take on a physical body that has 5 senses that can hear and feel the vibration of your mother's heartbeat. And that starts to give you this finite thing. And so you start trimming neurologic potential connections so that you can start to see the pattern that's emerging. So learning is a paring down of neurologic possibility until you learn one thing. As we enter this world and the 5 senses are further stimulated outside of the womb, we're in this constant state of paring down all the other possibilities of how the universe is, and we start to depend on the frailty of the 5 senses that we've been given to define our reality. And so we're paring down our true sense of connectivity and reality through neurologic programming or learning that's now dedicated to the 5 senses. By age 1, 2, you're starting to see the world differently, but you still haven't made the break. There's a phenomenon when you wave at a little kid, they will turn their hand around and wave at themselves in the same way you're waving at them. So they'll wave at you like this. And then suddenly around age 2, they'll realize they need to turn the hand around to wave at you. They realize that you are outside of them. So it takes a couple years of being limited to this visual cortex for us to realize we're separate from things and that somebody else is having a different experience than us or has a different perspective, and therefore we need to turn our hand around to wave at them over there so they understand the perspective. That takes 2 years of decreasing the likelihood that you're actually all interconnected, that you're all the same thing. And so you're learning separateness as a child. So life is a concentration of energy. How does it organize itself? It organizes itself to souls. Souls are these energy fields that can enter physical spaces or stay in the cosmos. So it's come into this physical space and it's going to organize energy. And so the consciousness that you're experiencing as a human is not human consciousness. It's actually impossible that anything's coming from the human. Consciousness is the vibrational connection to the knowledge field. The entire cosmos basically holds an information field. And that soul is an intricate part of the knowledge field. It's connected fully to it. There's nothing that can separate that energy field from that of a star or that of the universe or whatever we call source. And so we have this interconnected physics that's about to express itself in a finite way as a pig or a human or an earthworm. And I think it's just a really great opportunity for us to humble ourselves in the face of this, anthropomorphic belief that we're humans and therefore we're intelligent, therefore we have consciousness, to be like, no, we are consciousness. We are the connected universe, and we suddenly expressed a finite being that we would call human or pig. And that finite being is now having an experience of the infinite through the finite experience of particle rather than wave. The beautiful thing about death is you're moving back into the waveform. You can't destroy the energy. That's first law of thermodynamics. You can neither create or destroy energy. You can only change its form. So that pig was moving back into a waveform from its particle expression as a pig identity, and you got to suddenly step into that field. And so what did you actually feel when you said that suddenly time slowed down or exited time and everything became tangible? You were experiencing an energy field, a soul, that suddenly was expressing its reconnected self. And you feel this at the deathbed of humans all of the time, which is this thing that was a frail, dying biology in its release of its five senses and the egoic structure that it believed. That's such a high energy demand biologically to maintain all of those fake beliefs, artificial realities. All of the forms of addiction that we take on as humans are genius coping mechanisms to survive a state of belief of disconnectedness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the soul is yearning and is great cognitive dissonance for this fracture of reality. And it's yearning to get wholeness back. And in that, it's creating so much stress for the organism that it's going to die. It's going to kill itself. Suicide is the only option. And so we're reaching for these things to dull the senses, whether it be the Instagram feed or our food or alcohol. We are dulling our senses to try to survive this cognitive felt dissonance between the believed human condition and the actual natural condition. There's something called human nature. We have a word for it. And so the dissonance between the reality of human nature and our cognitive experience or our felt experience of being human creates so much dissonance that it literally, I think, is intolerable to the human mind. And so we're reaching for 1,000 things to distract ourselves, to dull our senses, to dull our sense of that so that we can survive this fractured state. T.J. Woodward is beautiful. It's Woodward, I think T.J. Woodward. But T.J. wrote an incredible book called Conscious Recovery. I think it was 2010. And now he's built an enormous curriculum and everything else. And I think it offers kind of an alternative to AA in that instead of seeing the alcohol as the disease or the alcoholism as a disease, he flips it around to show it as a genius coping mechanism.
100%.
And when you find out what you're coping for, and then you can get past the identity of alcoholism very quickly. It's like, oh, that's not my identity at all. That was just a tool that I used. It's one of the dangerous things about AA, if there is one, it's taking on the identity of a disease. And I see this all the time in my field. Endocrinology is classic for it. We're the experts in diabetes, for example. And all you have to do is walk into a dinner party these days to listen to somebody say, I am diabetic. No, you're actually a light being that's 10,000 times brighter than a star that's organized from space, time, around a soul that's infinite in space. There's no way that your identity is I am diabetic. And yet we can convince a human consciousness because of its state of dissonance that it is a disease. And so we are, as doctors, handing out artificial identities. I am diabetic. Yeah. I am depressed. I am alcoholic.
I agree 100%.
So we grab these external diseases as our identity because it most matches what we're feeling. It's like, oh, that's why I feel like I am. I'm an alcoholic. That explains why I feel this way. No, you feel this way because you have an artificial belief system that you're separate from the divine, that you're separate from nature. And as long as you think that alcoholism is your problem, it won't get you to the opportunity to jump to that further. That's to solve that real core healing that has to happen is you are not separate. And so that's where disease and disease systems, AA or diabetes management or the rest, these are crutches that are palliating a human broken identity. And it's great danger in that. And in some ways, the more altruistic the society tells you are for grabbing onto this, oh, you're a recovered alcoholic. Wow, that's amazing. We know that thing. And so we can attribute a bunch of social reward to the identity of I am alcoholic, or we can do a bunch of reward to I am diabetic. Like, oh wow, that you're sorry. You get compassion, or at least you get empathy, and you get these different vibrations coming back at you, or So I think there's this moment in time where we could just stop and become still, and witness ourselves for a moment in the same way that you witnessed a dying pig. You are dying. I am dying. We are biologies that are rapidly dying. We're accelerating that death rate through our broken relationship to nature. And so let's come still enough until we feel the waveform. And so let's come into this present moment where suddenly you're like, oh, wow, I am so much bigger than anything. I think that this is something to ponder as humans, though, is that we actually are best at experiencing ourselves in the context of story. Your name is fascinating to me. It's a Luke story here. And so we've got this understanding that we've started to talk about a lot in Farmer's Footprint, which is our nonprofit working around regenerative food systems, is that this great quote is that humans are not made of cells, they are made of stories. I think that's why your podcasts continue to capture so many downloads, is you're so good at bringing us into these moments of fireside experience that we developed all of human experience in, as genetically and epigenetically programmed into us, is the ability to see the universe through the lens of story. Without telling each other stories at the fireside, then everything that happened in the day doesn't actually get recorded and witnessed. If it's not witnessed, it's not real. And so we had to share story around the fireside. And this is the scary thing, I think, what happens when we have a society that no longer tells each other stories, but consume the same external stories that we find on a Netflix stream or something like that, is if that's the stories we're consuming, those are not real. Those are artificial stories that might be expressing some, figment of our own truths and things like that.
And that can be said for so much of the media
can be some
as well, right?
All media.
Not just entertainment.
All media,
but it's like,
social media being the worst of it.
Yeah.
And so when you start to fill your evenings, not with telling others what you've experienced, but then adopting this space-filling thing of other people's stories that aren't relevant to you, you start to live in a completely abstract space, and nothing that happened to you today does get logged and learned from. And so now you have to go repeat that lesson because you didn't learn it, because you didn't tell the story. And so we need to get back in the habit of making dinner together and gathering around tables together to tell each other stories of our day. I witnessed this thing today. I got to tell you this. I was walking down the street and I saw this cat, and this cat did this thing. I don't know what it means, but this happened to me. And then somebody's like, oh my gosh, I had this other cat thing that happened. And pretty soon around this table, we're realizing that feline medicine is here to tell us something. And we wouldn't have learned the lesson. We would have had to repeat the cat experience again if we didn't tell the story. So we are stuck in a very repetitive, boring version of life because we have to keep repeating, like Groundhog Day, our day yesterday, because we didn't tell the story, and therefore it didn't become real, and therefore we didn't learn from it. And so we're stuck in this repetitive, painful state of like, I just burned another day and it felt exactly like the day before. It's because you're not actually feeling, experiencing, and seeing it for its fullness and reality. So you haven't learned anything from it. So you're going to repeat it. And
I find the karma of relationships very similar to that too, right? How we draw in these people into our lives to help us experience the things within that still need to be addressed and be healed, until we finally face and address and heal those things. Then those type of people stop appearing all of a sudden, and people that are more supportive of our well-being, that help us to grow in inspirational ways rather than ways of aversion of pain. It's fascinating.
I was a physician in an interesting period of time where this kind of cult understanding, or this maybe it's something just in the ethers of humanity, started to understand narcissism. And so this was a period of time that still persists today, I think, but there was this flash flood of everybody saying, oh, I'm married to a narcissist, or I know a narcissist, and this is a narcissist and a narcissist. And in being a physician, you get to sit in an exam room with hundreds of patients a week, and when you start to see dozens of those hundreds start to just tell the same story of, well, there's this narcissist and it's ruining my life and blah blah blah. Despite all the different personalities that sit there, you start to see similar traits in the person that has attracted the narcissist to them. And you realize that they are actually creating the phenomenon of narcissism. And so this is this danger of blaming outside of yourself all the relationships and all the traits you think you're seeing in relationships that are attacking you or keeping you from your full potential or, parasitizing you. you had to create the polarity that would allow that thing to even exist, or else it wouldn't. So you're exactly right.
Totally.
You are going to keep bringing all the narcissists to you until you change your condition, because you are the polarity for the narcissist, and the narcissist can't exist without somebody who's completely let go of their own volition and doesn't believe they can create their own reality. Well, you're going to have to bring in a narcissist to fill that gap, and why do our current politicians look like our current politicians? Because we are the polarity to that.
I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine, she'd worked on the Obama campaign in, I think, 2008. So she got a job in the White House. I gave her a job in the White House after that. And she was in a meeting with some very high-level economic advisors to the president. And one of them said, well, if we do that policy, it'll save the average American maybe $300 a month. But, I mean, what's $300 a month? Now, to you, it might not be all that big a deal. To you, it might not be all that big a deal. To the majority of Americans, that anybody working in government would even think that way.
I remember a time very vividly where $300 a month was meaningful in my life.
And that is true of millions of people in America. And when it was true for you, you were younger, you didn't have a wife, you didn't have a family, you already had the goods that were the seeds of. So I think the issue is, who do we have to be, not just to be successful in this world, not just who do we have to be happy in this world, but who do we have to be to help change this world? And I think manifesting our own well-being is very, very important, and becoming happy. The Course in Miracles says the purpose of life is to be happy. And there's a line in the Course that says, as you grow closer, I don't know what the words are, to enlightenment or something, it says you grow closer to your natural talent of protecting your brothers.
Nice.
It's like the bodhisattva. The closer you get to enlightenment, the more you care about suffering. There's no serious spiritual or religious journey that gives any of us a pass on concerning ourselves with the suffering of other sentient beings. And that's the part that I feel is the next step for the higher consciousness community and for the wellness community. I see not as much as what I would wish to see in terms of how we're going to end the suffering of others. A lot of people say, I'm totally into Jesus. He was a great teacher. This goes beyond that. This does move into the realm, unattached, as you said, to the constrictions or the filter of organized Christianity, with the belief that no one has a monopoly on something as profound as Jesus. But it does move beyond this, oh, he was a great teacher, oh, he was a great prophet, to the notion of a portal of energy. Now, the Course in Miracles says he was not the only one. But it's like a room, and it's got many names on the door. He is one name. And if he is your portal, you know it. And there's nothing in the Course in Miracles that says he should be. So it doesn't have any of that exclusive stuff. But if he is someone who, according to the Course, lived on the earth, but thought only the thoughts of heaven. Heaven is our awareness of oneness. So even though he lived here as a man and had all the physical senses, no perception was limited to the false evidence of the world. He was completely purified of any belief in separation, any belief in judgment, any belief in attack. They did not exist. He had reached that point. They did not exist in his consciousness. As a consequence of that, as a result of that, in that space of pure love, miracles occurred naturally, because miracles do occur naturally in the presence of love. The loaves of fishes, the water into wine, the healing, because he is at that place. The idea is that is the highest actualization of human being. Once again, we're not saying he's the only one to achieve that. He is one, however, who has achieved that. And having achieved it, has now been, according to the Course, given the authority to help you get there and to help me get there, should we request it. If we don't request it, it would be a violation of our free will. So the idea is, you're being nice to me. So it's easy to feel love and kindness and centeredness. But let's say you weren't. You were being condescending, mean. I realize this is a trap. Oh my God, it's going to be on
The hit piece.
Well, you're talking to somebody who's run for president, I remind you.
I can imagine.
It might be very difficult for me to find that place within myself. Okay, it's just a call for love. What's not love is a call for love. The Course says, whether you call it the Holy Spirit. Now, the Holy Spirit, the Course in Miracles says, and I think this is pretty traditional, connecting link between the consciousness of God and the consciousness of humanity that's within our minds, within our consciousness. Because Jesus is someone who has risen to the point, the idea here is that there are two parts of the mind. That which is one with God, every perception is love, and that which is the ego, the separated mind, every perception is fear. You and I sort of straddle two worlds, because even though we were born to be only love, from the minute we got here, we started being taught and trained by the thinking of the world, which is based on fear, right? Enlightenment is the unlearning. There are times where we can say to ourselves, I know this person, I know they're innocent, but my worldly experience is just too much for me right now. But if you can help me, I'm please. It's because it says he has the power. He says, my mind joined with your mind can shine away the ego. I will lend you, if you invite me in. I can't do it. If it means free will, you're totally free. But if you wish, I will join with yours. And we'll get past this hump. That's a little more than a great teacher.
When you look at ancient history and a lot of physicians and spiritual healers, when you look at religions like Christianity or maybe the more mystical side of Judaism, and Judaism in general, and Buddhism, I think you'll see that there are a lot of quotes and a lot of beliefs, even by those physicians, about how they tell you to heal. And so, for instance, with my faith, Christianity, you're going to see a lot, for instance, Jesus, he doesn't say this supplement or this medication or this practice has healed you. No, your faith has healed you. Or constantly in the Bible, it's talking about your beliefs or your thoughts. And so I really believe that if we're talking about healing, more than 50% is spiritual and mental when it comes to healing. One big thing I see that keeps people from healing is when they over-focus on their condition. It becomes the primary focus of their entire life.
Oh, right.
Now sometimes this is...
And also identity, right? Huge. The identity gets tied into that, where I'm a limey, I'm not disparaging anyone that is doing this, but it's a really important piece.
Well, both you and I have a lot of compassion for people with that, because when again, I didn't walk for a year. Like, when you don't walk, or you've got chronic Lyme or a chronic autoimmune disease or cancer, and you are in sort of a crippled state, it's incredibly hard not to only think about your condition and not to be a victim and not to obsess over and over and over, and also even think about trying to do things to heal. But the reality is, you really should spend the most limited amount of time you can on doing what's necessary to heal. But outside of that time, focusing on the future, focusing on your family, focusing on God, focusing on serving and loving others, because when you focus on your condition, it in a way feeds that condition. And it also creates a lot of obsession as a form of worry that starts to tax your pancreas and your insulin levels and cause cortisol to go up. And so you really have to be careful not to obsess on the condition and focus just on healing and other things in life. But my book's called Think This, Not That. And really goes through, here's what you should think in terms of adopting a healing mindset. And this is healing physically, but it's also having great relationships, having success in life, just living your best life possible. And so we tap into identity and purpose and all those things going deep. And I think it's probably a different perspective than almost anybody's ever read. And I believe that healing really starts with your identity and your purpose. But a lot of people go throughout their entire life without really being aware of what's going on inside of them. What are these emotions I'm feeling? What do I think? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are these? And also that of others. And like, so for instance, one of the greatest things you can do is be able to develop awareness of yourself and others. It's called sometimes in the psychology world, self-distancing. I want to tell you about one of the coolest study I've ever read, I think. It's called the Batman study.
I like it already.
Exactly. And so they did this study on kids, and they wanted to see what made them the most productive. And so they had one group of kids, and I think these were 4-year-olds and 6-year-olds, and they would go in and they would work on a project. And once they got bored, or once they felt like they did as much as they could, then they would, go and play games. Okay. So the first group of kids, they said, hey, go in and work on this project. And then afterwards you can play games. And so they'd work on it and they'd go and play games. The second group, they said, they did this practice of self-distancing, saying, Johnny, hey, think about yourself doing this and stepping outside of yourself. And they helped them with this practice of self-distancing, of becoming more aware, self-aware. And they improved what they were doing by, I want to say it was something like around 13 to 16%. So it was a pretty big improvement just because for my kids becoming self-aware. Now here's where I think the study becomes really amazing. They had another group of kids and they said, hey, who is your favorite superhero or princess or whatever? So it was like, I'm Batman. Like the one little boy was like, I'm Batman. Another one was, the little girl was like, I'm Dora the Explorer. And they said, okay, go in and do this. But you're Batman. Well, those kids were like 26% more productive at getting things done because they had an identity change. They believe I'm Batman. So like literally just believing that, having that level of awareness, I think is so powerful. And a lot of people are walking around and they have a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, very low self-esteem, low self-worth, low self-value. And I think if people really recognized that they're a child of God, that God created them with gifts that no one else on this entire planet has, and if they could really just tap into those, what they could do is just really becomes almost unimaginable. If somebody were to tell me when I was younger that I would be having the level of impact that I have on my podcast or my supplement company or in life, I would have said, no way, that's just crazy, and I feel so blessed because of it. And I feel humble because it's all God. Of my relationship with him and really him leading me into, hey, I've called you to do this. Here's your gift. Like becoming more aware of those things. And so all that being said, I think that, there's this C.S. Lewis quote that I love, and I'm going to totally butcher it. But basically he says something like this: if we were to see each other right now, like you and I, in our spiritual forms, we would just shudder and just sit there and just be in absolute awe and wonder of he says, of little g, but gods and goddesses, and we would just be like, oh. And so he said, if you look at the most average person, if you look at a homeless person, if you walk up to them, it'd be very easy for us to have maybe a superiority complex or feel like I'm better than that person. But if you would see them in their true potential, what they're capable of in their spiritual form, you would be, he said you'd have a temptation to bow down and worship that homeless person if you saw what their true potential was and who they could truly become. And so if you can develop that level of awareness about who you are and who other people truly are, it really can change your life.
That's beautiful. How do you practice discernment and boundaries while still loving people unconditionally?
Well, one, just don't throw pearls to pigs. Don't take your time that is so precious and your gifts to somebody who is absolutely choosing not to embrace it. You want to, if you've got, I think about it like this. If I do some regenerative farming. Jordan Rubin and I own like 4,000 acres of certified organic land. We own some in Missouri. We own a lot in Tennessee.
Cool.
And we've got greenhouses. We practice something called food foresting and permaculture.
Epic.
But we try and be conscious of when we grow certain plants, the soil we're planting in. So if something's really rocky, and the topsoil is very thin, we don't typically plant there. Now we will then go and have our cows go and defecate and urinate and feed on the grass that's there, and then all of a sudden, a few years later, you're like, whoa. But my point there is that we can only spend so much time sowing seeds. We want to sow on good soil, and so I do think, and sometimes soil just isn't ready yet. Sometimes it needs to be urinated and defecated upon. I mean, if we could dig this analogy, but in a way, it's actually, this is very true. Before they need to be, smelly and down enough and whatever else in order to realize, okay, you know what? Now I'm ready to be planted on. And so I think that's part of it, is also knowing, like, there's no use in just taking, if I had, fruit seeds, just dropping them on a hard concrete sidewalk, nothing will grow. So I'm wasting their time, wasting my time, wasting all the time. And it's not to say in that individual interaction, I shouldn't be loving and compassionate and do everything I can, because in that action we should. But if I'm actually going to go and pursue somebody and spend extra time in order to do something to help turn this earth into a heavenly place, I'm going to go and look for the best soil possible in order to plant in. And so that would be my thought there.